Anthony Richardson only played 4 games last season because of a concussion and a shoulder injury, but now the Colts get back potentially one of the scariest weapons in the NFL. So are the Colts and Shane Steichen due for a big year too? Let's go ahead and discuss. What's crackalackin'? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know so, and welcome back to the Deep Dive series where we take a look at each and every NFL team and project how they're going to do in 2024. And today, we got the Indianapolis Colts. But before we talk about their 2024, we got to talk about 2023. Anthony Richardson started the opener versus the Jags, and despite the loss, he looked pretty solid. Unfortunately, in week 2, though, he would miss the second half against Houston, but the Colts rode the back of Zach Moss to victory, who was filling in for Jonathan Taylor, who was waiting to get paid. Going into week 3 against the Ravens, the Colts were missing offensive lineman Braden Smith and Ryan Kelly, and Gardner Minshew was making his first of many starts. They ended up getting the victory behind the foot of Matt Gay in overtime. And then in week 4 against the Rams, the Colts got Anthony Richardson back, but they were missing another offensive lineman in Bernhard Raimann, and he was able to push the game into overtime for the second week in a row, but this time they fell short. Richardson hurt his shoulder in a victory against the Titans and would be shut down for the rest of the season, so Gardner Minshew stepped in, and probably had the 2 worst games of the season against the Jags and the Browns. But after that, Minshew and Steichen, they would figure it out and go 4-1 in the next 5 games. The last third of the season was a bit more up and down for the Colts as they got pounded by the Bengals and Falcons, but they also mollywopped the Steelers. After a 1-score victory over a surging Raiders team, the Colts were staring down a playoff spot. All they needed to do was beat division rival Houston Texans, but unfortunately a dropped ball on 4th and 2 near the red zone would effectively end the game, and the Colts finished 9-8 on the outside looking in. The Colts weren't just hurt on offense, but the cornerback room dealt with a lot of injuries, whether it was a quad injury to Juju Brents or an ACL injury to Dallas Flowers. And in terms of efficiency, this team was pretty middle of the pack. However, the defense had a nasty habit of giving up big plays, and that's reflected in their points allowed, where they were 28th in the league. Gardner Minshew had to battle back against some early deficits, and it either made for a very exciting game or a blowout. Ultimately, going 9-8, despite the circumstances, is pretty good. Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be, because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first time deposit up to $250. That's right. So if you're gonna go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO, take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. When it came to the offseason, the Colts didn't really lose many big names via free agency, as probably their biggest losses were high-end backups like quarterback Gardner Minshew and running back Zach Moss. But let's talk about the additions. Let's talk about what they did do in free agency and the draft. By far, the biggest addition to this team via free agency was Joe Flacco. The Colts just saw their backup quarterback, Gardner Minshew, leave for the Raiders, and he played a majority of the season last year. Anthony Richardson only played 4 games, dealt with a couple of injuries, and you're going to worry that his playing style might lend itself to him missing a couple of games here or there. So having a very good, competent backup quarterback goes a long way. Joe Flacco, comeback player of the year. I'd be happy with that. Outside of that, the Colts really just focused on re-signing their own talent. They did have one other addition in like Raekwon Davis, former Dolphin, fins up baby, who just gives you another big body on the interior. We saw with Grover Stewart when he was suspended 6 games. The team really struggled to stop the run here and there, so having someone who can fill in, it kind of goes a long way. So they did bring in Davis, but outside of that, again, they just re-signed their own guys. Michael Pittman Jr., they got on a really good contract, as we've seen a few of the last receiver contracts, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, maybe you should get in on paying your guys a little bit earlier so you're not paying a premium. But 3 years, $70 million, that's really solid. They brought back Zaire Franklin, a linebacker, Kenny Moore. They also brought back Julian Blackman there at safety on a 1-year deal. I'm kind of shocked that his market wasn't big at all, but there's the Roquan Davis pickup we just previously talked about. They did extend Grover Stewart. You got like Tyquan Lewis. So this was a team that was like, hey, we got a lot of good parts. We want to be able to bring those parts back. But let's find some good backup or even rotation players to add. And we're going to really focus on bringing in and developing talent from the draft, which they had a good one. Let's go ahead and talk about it. When it came to the Colts draft, I thought they hit the first 4 picks out of the park. When it comes to those first 4 rounds, you want to be able to nail that. I think the Colts did. They certainly did with their first overall, or their first pick, 15th overall, as they got their pick of the gander at defender, as the first defender came off the board, 15th overall, Liatu Latu. For some people, he was their edge 1. I was a Jared Verse guy. What can I say? Liatu Latu, though, was one hell of a prospect, one of probably the more complete edge prospects in this class in terms of mechanics, technique, pass rush toolbox. He brings that all to the table. And with Gus Bradley, he's not blitzing. So you want to be sure your defensive line rotation is mwah. And Liatu Latu is going to be bringing that with guys like Kwity Paye, and you got Sampson there. So he's going to add to that rotation, and I think he's going to be a vital piece moving forward. And then in round 2, they get Adonai Mitchell. Mitchell just falls. I don't know what it is. Maybe some people just didn't like that he took routes off, or took plays off, so to speak. If you were unfamiliar with that whole thing, it was basically, you could notice like, okay, that some routes he's not running at full speed. It looks like he's just kind of resting. And he was like, yeah, I took some of these plays off when I knew the ball wasn't coming in my direction, so I could play the whole drive, so I could play the whole game, I could play more snaps. Okay, I get the excuse, but not something you want to see. Not necessarily what you want to hear. That's going to change in the NFL. But I don't think there was a lack of work ethic or anything with Adonai Mitchell. You're getting a wonderful talent here, a wonderful deep threat who's going to contend with Alec Pierce, I think had the most routes ran last season. He's going to contend with Pierce as that wide receiver 2, that deep threat, as you already got Pittman there on the outside as well, and then Downs is going to be your slot. So they knocked the first 2 picks out of the water. And then they got Matt Goncalves, who's going to be a developmental tackle / guard here. Couldn't really partake in the offseason process because of a injury. I can't remember what the injury was specifically, but he was a part of that like 3rd tier. I had him in this like 3rd tier tackles, maybe around like the back end of the 3rd, somewhere in the 4th, but he ends up going earlier in the 3rd, as we saw tackles kind of fly off the board. Like once that second ran just started, people were like, oh, okay, we need to get a tackle. Like we saw Delmar Glaze get picked up relatively early and whatnot. We saw Caden Wallace get picked up early there in the 3rd round. So Goncalves, he's coming to a situation where he can actually develop, and I like that. Then Tanner Bortolini, I thought was a steal. Like I had him as I think a 3rd round prospect. He ends up going in the middle of the 4th round. Don't know why teams didn't like him. Typically guys that move the way they do, or typically guys that move like he does, end up playing a long time in the NFL at center. And to me, he's the heir apparent to Ryan Kelly. Ryan Kelly, we've seen injuries. He's just getting down in the twilight years of his career. So Bortolini for me is the heir apparent there at center. So I loved their first 4 picks. And let's talk about the remainder of their day 3 picks. They get Anthony Gold out of Oregon State, undersized speedster, brings return capabilities. I think that's what he's coming in to do. He's going to be a return man there. And then Jalen Carlisle, I really liked coming out of Mizzou. And I think he's going to be making the transition to linebacker. He brings a lot of girth to the position. And then they double dip, so to speak, at safety with Jalen Simpson, which a lot of people liked him. They thought he could probably go a little bit earlier. I wasn't one of those guys, but with Julian Blackman on a 1-year deal, maybe you are looking to the future there at safety. Daniel Scott, unfortunately, tearing his ACL once again, 2 years in a row. There is going to be a opening there for him to make the squad. And then you got Micah Abrams, who can work outside. He can work inside, play slot. Might be a practice squad guy coming out of Marshall. And then Jonah, was it Lialu? Probably butchered that name, but he tested real well. I think I kind of had him as probably a priority UDFA, but I don't know. I feel like he's probably going to end up being a practice squad body at the end of the day. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about this coaching staff. We're going into year 2 of Shane Steichen, and unfortunately last year, us as fans didn't get what we wanted, and that was to see Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor in a Shane Steichen offense. We were robbed of that. We were robbed of that. Whether, unfortunately, it was injury, there was some circumstance in there with the contract dispute with Jonathan Taylor, but unfortunately, we didn't get what we wanted to see. And you want to know why we were so excited? Because we saw what Shane Steichen did as the Eagles OC, how he developed and just led Jalen Hurts to that breakout season in 2022 where the Eagles went to the Super Bowl. We were excited to see Anthony Richardson in that type of offense. The offense he's bringing here being a very, like a modern spread, RPO heavy. They were like first or second in the league when it came to RPOs back in 2002. Again, this is with the Eagles. They were second or first in the league when it came to inside zone run, which that's great. That's right up Jonathan Taylor's alley. He's a guy you want to just kind of plant and go because once he gets going, he's hard to stop. But they also use a lot of motion, and it was just unfortunate. But what we did see last season was Shane Steichen's ability to adapt to circumstance. When Anthony Richardson went down, Gardner Minshew came in. If you remember, those first couple of starts weren't pretty against the Browns and the Jags, were Minshew's worst games of the year. But his ability to be able to adapt, be like, okay, we can't be so RPO heavy because, well, teams aren't scared of Minshew basically tucking the ball and going. They're not afraid of what Minshew could do with his legs. So teams were playing a lot of man coverage against him. So it was like, okay, we can't get away with this with a RPO offense. But he took advantage of Minshew's arm, and I know a lot of people will be like, what do you mean took advantage of that noodle? Yeah, because Minshew's actually a pretty precise quarterback. Plays with that grit too. He's got that gunslinger mentality. So they really focused on attacking the short to intermediate part of the field. And again, despite circumstance, led this team to 9-8 last season. But now we got a healthy Anthony Richardson. We got a healthy and a happy Jonathan Taylor. I'm stoked. I feel like we're gonna get what we missed out on last season. And I mean, that's a big reason why my grades are so high offensively for the coaching staff for Shane Steichen. You got an A when it comes to the run offense, got a B+ when it comes to the passing defense. His OC is going to be Jim Bob Cooter. He was here last year. Prior to that, he was the passing game coordinator for the Jaguars, but he did work under Shane Steichen back in 2001 as a consultant for the Eagles. And then when it comes to this defense, listen, I can't even say it's like a love-hate relationship with Gus Bradley. It's like a light-hate relationship when it comes to Gus Bradley. Like, I think he is a very average defensive coordinator. I really do. And I feel like in the past I've given that a lot of hate, but it's like he's very successful in what he wants to do with the defense. I just don't think it's very. I think at times it can be predictable, and he's not really going to produce a defense that will ever have the opposing offense on their heels. I just don't. For one, like what you're dealing with when it comes to Gus Bradley, this is going to be like the Seattle 3. He's a former Seattle defensive coordinator, which is the Seattle 3, cover 3, a lot of single high, and he's not going to blitz. He's not. He's usually every year at the bottom when it comes to blitz rate. Last year, 28th. Might have been a career high for him. But he really relies on stunts over blitzes. He really wants his front four to be able to get that pressure. That's why we've seen Gus Bradley teams typically value depth in that defensive line and having a good, healthy rotation, keeping guys fresh so they can pin their ears back and just go and get after it. Probably a big reason why they went out and got Liatu Latu to add to that edge room. At the end of the day, for me though, Gus Bradley's still just kind of a middle of the road defensive coordinator in the league. That's just the case. Like, hey, B- grades, those aren't bad. I just don't think there's anything that kind of like takes him over the edge. But if you're not familiar with him, he was formerly the Jags head coach a time ago. But he's been the defensive coordinator in multiple places. I mentioned Seattle, but also he was a DC for the Raiders and the Chargers. But let's talk about the rest of this coaching staff because there's some fun names. There really is. So let's go ahead. Let's move down here as we got, where are you at? Cato June. Colts fans, you should know this man. Maybe if you're a little older, but former linebacker for the Colts. Now he's a linebacker's assistant. He's been here for a couple of years. I'm a sucker for seeing former players end up as position coaches, eventual head coaches like DeMeco Ryans. I just love that type of stuff. So it's fun to see June here. You also have Ron Miles, who has been around the NFL for a long time as a defensive backs coach. He will have quite the job ahead of him as he develops like Juju Brents, Jalen Johnson to some degree, Nick Cross, stuff like that. So we'll see. We'll see how he does. But again, a guy that's been around the league for a long time. So we also got DeAndre Smith as the running backs coach. You got Richard Smith, the linebackers coach, another dude that's been around the NFL for a hell of a long time. He's also the run game coordinator here. Got Tony Soprano. I said Soprano. But you know what I meant. Former Dolphins coach, head coach, fins up, baby, fins up. A guy that knows offensive line. This offensive line has just been so good since Andrew Luck has left. And he has a little part of that, man. He has a little part of that. But big fan of him. Alex Tanney, former backup quarterback in the NFL or journeyman quarterback. He's here as the passing game coordinator. I was just like, man, that name sounds familiar. I had to go like Google. I was like, oh, okay, I remember you as a draft prospect. Reggie Wayne, the great Reggie Wayne, wide receivers coach here. Hella fun. One of the best receivers of all time. Him, Marvin Harrison. You had like Dallas Clark there. Like, it was just scary pass catchers back in the day, and now he gets to develop scary pass catchers. So you love to see it. I'm always a big Reggie Wayne fan. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about this roster. Of course, we're starting with the offense. As per usual, you'll see my grades for each position group. We could start with Anthony Richardson because, well, the man's played all of 4 games, so it was kind of hard to rate him high when it came to my quarterback rankings. But they do bring in Joe Flacco as a backup here. I like that quite a bit. You got other guys like Sam Ehlinger, who's probably going to be the emergency quarterback, though. Keenan Slovis, he is going to be a camp arm there. So I don't know, maybe he pushes for that quarterback 3 spot. But Anthony Richardson is just so deadly. You know you're dealing with a guy with crazy mobility, He's going to be a terrifying runner at his size, like 6'5", 240. So we're talking like Josh Allen freakish. He's got a big arm. But we got to see how he develops as a passer, because honestly, in this league, you could only get by so much as being just someone people have to game plan when it comes to your legs. You got to be able to do it through the air. And I think I think this offense is going to be effective at that, especially with like the addition of Adonai Mitchell. You already have Michael Pittman Jr., who is just a freaking monster, good contested catch threat. Last year, 53.6% on contested catches. A guy that's not going to drop the ball. Only 5 drops last year, 4.4% drop rate. That's exceptionally low. Matter of fact, man, what were the forced missed tackles at? 5? That's fine. That's all right. That's okay. That is what it is. But I'm excited to see Anthony Richardson. Bit of a question mark here. What to expect. We saw a little bit of it last year, but I do think we're going to see some of those peaks and some of those valleys when it comes to the offense. Fortunately, he's got Jonathan Taylor, and hopefully a healthy Jonathan Taylor right there behind him. One of the best running backs in the league. Could be due for a big year, especially if the offensive line can stay healthy, because the offensive line is exceptionally good. That's why my grades for the offensive line are so stinking high. A+ pass protection, A in run blocking. Big fan of the offensive line. We can break down the offensive line real quick, go through at least the starters. Bernhard Raimann was someone I absolutely loved coming out of Central Michigan. Had a first round grade on him. He ends up falling, I think, to the 3rd round. And last year looked brilliant. I loved it, man. To me, this is me taking my victory lap last year. He was just hella good at left tackle. I'm glad it's all worked out. And now I feel great. Just very solid, very solid. Already started to prove he is one of the better tackles in the league. Let's see if he takes that next step into like, oh no, he's a straight up stud. He's among the best in the NFL. Next to him is Quentin Nelson, who, in all honesty, Quentin Nelson, he has slowed down a bit, but he's still a hell of a good pass protector, an above average, solid run blocker. He's not what he used to be, but he's still hella good. Ryan Kelly, can you stay healthy? Ended up playing 14 games last year, so not bad, but we go back and look. Ryan Kelly's just not been able to play like a full slate, though he will hover around. Like he will still play a hell lot of snaps, but he has missed time in the past. He's been very solid for the Colts over his career. Last year, he was still playing really good football. So probably won't see like a Tanner Bortolini relatively early. We just won't. Maybe we won't see him until like year 3. I think Ryan Kelly's still got some good years left in him, but he is up there in years as he's 31. How long can he really stick around the league past that? And honestly, he's got a contract maybe that the Colts want to move on from in the future. Will Fries. Man, last year was a year for guys that I adamantly thought not were rubbish, but just were less than ideal starters, and I didn't think they'd be able to turn it around. But lo and behold, Will Fries was one of those guys that turned it around and kind of like changed my opinion on him. Spencer Brown for the Bills was another one, someone who I kind of gave up on, but then ended up having a solid season last year. I will say it's not like I'm like through the moon like Will Fries, top 20 starter in the NFL. I'm not there. No, absolutely not. I think if he is like the 5th or 4th best player on your offensive line, you probably feel good about the shape that your offensive line is in. And I think, yeah, he is a starter in the NFL. He's quality. I do feel like he is the 5th best starter on this offensive line, but that just speaks to how good this offensive line is. But Will Fries, honestly, has come along, gotten better as a pass protector, and yeah, still a work in progress as a run blocker, but I've kind of changed my opinion on him. And I know some of you freaking Colts fans, man, y'all were last year just in my comment section like, yo, Will Fries isn't as bad as you think. Go back. He's gotten better. And yeah, he did. He has. I am not as pessimistic with him anymore. Braden Smith, he was a little slowed by injury last season, unfortunately. Ended up only playing 573 snaps. But when he was playing, he was hella good. Still really good. And unfortunately, he had to kind of rush Blake Freeland in there. A right tackle who was not ready by any means. Probably was one of the worst starters in the NFL. But he was a rookie that needed time to develop. And he just wasn't afforded that time, unfortunately. So offensive line looking really good. We go to the pass catchers, the weapons. And let's start with Jelani Woods, who missed all of last season. He is now back. He is now hopefully healthy. I mean, those hamstring injuries, they tend to linger. So I'm hoping he's healthy. Didn't end up playing last season. And he's kind of this freak, man, who's just built insane. He's got some good straight line speed. And I think he can come in and be a legitimate, like, big contributor. I think he's going to be better than what they saw in Kylan Granson last season, who I feel like is more of a big slot. You got Mo Alley Cox, who honestly is just kind of your typical tight end too. And then they got a couple of other guys behind him, but it's like Jelani Woods, you kind of feel like could be that next breakout tight end. And unfortunately, didn't get to see him last season because of injury. If you're unfamiliar with him, I think he was a former quarterback at one point back in high school. But nonetheless, a lot of good starters here. Like Michael Pittman, I would argue he's in that top 10 to top 15 range when it comes to wide receivers in the NFL. Josh Downs was hella good last season coming out of the slot for a majority of his snaps. Was able to create a little bit after the catch as well. 81% of the time he was in the slot. But yeah, I was a big fan of Downs coming out of North Carolina. Ends up being another good pickup here by the Colts, man. Chris Ballard just knows how to draft. And then Adonai Mitchell, Alec Pierce are going to be your other options there at the other wide receiver spot. Alec Pierce wasn't really that effective, but to be fair, Gardner Minshew wasn't going to chuck a lot of deep balls. It's just, again, got that noodle of an arm. He wasn't really going to chuck it deep a ton. And Alec Pierce was running a lot of deep routes last season. Still managed to get like 500 some yards, but you were probably looking for an upgrade at that wide receiver or other outside wide receiver position, or at least someone who's going to come in here and be good competition. Now you get Adonai Mitchell, who is also a vertical threat. Also has that vertical speed. Not similar in size. I mean, they're both tall. Both are around that like 6'3". I think Alec Pierce is actually a bit bigger. I'm trying to remember. I want to say he's like 6'4", like 210. 6'3", 211. Was close. While Adonai Mitchell needs to put a little bit more meat on the bones. But he's also going to be used as that deep threat. But he's also, I would say, a more shifty route runner. Like he's someone that can win on the short to intermediate parts of the field. So he gives you a little bit more nuance as a receiver than an Alec Pierce. And I mean, again, that's why I'm kind of high on this offense. I feel like they're going to just be fun to watch, especially if they can stay healthy. But let's talk about the depth, and I guess we could just start where we were at with the wide receiver core, as you got Ashton Dulin, who's just kind of been here for a while. You're going to be a good wide receiver 5 option. Solid. Anthony Gold, I think, makes the team just simply because he can return, but he also gives them that, like, I don't know. I feel like he's just more Josh Downs, more of what the expectation is for Josh Downs, except for maybe not necessarily as good. Some of the other guys they have back there, a wide receiver like Juwan Winfrey's been unable to really stick to a team. He's kind of bounced around the league before he was with the Broncos at one point. I think that's where he started his career. Jason Bean, former Kansas quarterback, UDFA. They're moving to wide receiver. Good. Kind of expected that. Probably ends up being a practice squad player. Don't know if I could tell you. I think is Xavier White the former Ohio State? I don't think so. Texas Tech. Yeah, couldn't tell you much about him. Didn't evaluate him. Maybe I'm thinking of Xavier Smith. Tyree Cleveland, former, I think, a Florida player. Bit of a speedster there, but I mean, those guys are all long shots to make the roster. Let's talk about the tight ends, as you got Will Mallory, who's played some good football last year, actually. Ended up having 200 yards. He was, 207 yards. No tutties, though, is what it is. Wasn't great at the contested catch, but no drops. I mean, that was something. He kind of felt like coming out of Miami, more of like a jumbo wide, because you're not going to expect Mallory to block. He's just not that type of guy. But as like someone who could come in as a receiving option in the tight end room, I think that's pretty solid. Drew Ogletree's kind of cut from the same cloth as Will Mallory. Just Mallory doesn't have the domestic abuse thing in his past, allegedly. But yeah, I don't know if Ogletree makes the roster, because as long as like injury isn't a thing, it's probably Mallory, Alley Cox, Granson, and Woods. Couldn't tell you much about Eric Tomlinson and Jordan Murray. Let's move to the running back position, as Trey Sermon is kind of... A lot of people have been talking about him in OTA. It's like, hey, this is going to be the running back too. He's looking good. And someone who's kind of bounced around, former Niner, former Eagle. And now it's like, because a lot of people really liked him coming out of Ohio State. So, I don't know if he's there as the running back too. Watch out. I really thought Evan Hall might be that guy. He's kind of coming out of Northwestern. He was kind of a do-it-all, brings return experience, good receiver, good pass protector, just kind of a do-everything. I figured he would have been the next to be that like running back too, the guy that can come in for Taylor. But right now it sounds like the odds-on favorite is Trey Sermon. Unfortunately, Tyler Goodson was the guy that had that 4th and 2 drop. Was it the best place pass? No. But it was right there at his hip. Like, it was a catchable ball. So, like, and Tyler Goodson was a fun player coming out of Iowa. I don't want to knock him. I think he's going to make the roster here. He's going to be a part of that running back backfield. Couldn't tell you much about guys like Trent Penix and Xavier Scott. So, yeah, the running back room, probably less than desirable just because there's a ton of unknowns. And, like, from what we've seen with Tyler Goodson, he kind of feels fine. But, like, Evan Hall and Trey Sermon, they're a bit of an unknown. So, past Jonathan Taylor, things could get a little fishy. And then let's move to the offensive line, as Goncalves is going to be developed. I think probably maybe to be an heir apparent someday for, like, potentially Quentin Nelson at guard, or maybe Braden Smith. Jake Witt, if you don't remember him, I forgot the college he was coming out of. It was some lower competition school, but like his testing was ridiculous at his pro day. So he's very much a developmental guy, someone who might end up sticking to the practice squad for another year. They got Josh Sills there on the interior. I don't love their interior depth, if I'm going to be honest. Like Wesley French, I was a sucker for French coming out of, was it like Western Michigan? I don't remember. It was indeed Western Michigan. But when he's seen time, it has not been good. It just hasn't. And he is probably like the go-to backup if injuries hit the interior. Though I wouldn't mind if Ryan Kelly misses games to send Bortolini in there, because I have a lot of faith in Bortolini. Danny Pittner is still here with the squad after coming out of Ball State all of like 4 or 5 years ago. Kind of your versatile offensive lineman, can play guard, can be a swing tackle. Though when having to when he was given like starting opportunity, it just wasn't pretty. Arlington Hambright, kind of a journeyman, formerly drafted by the Bears. It feels like a hell of a long time ago. They got Dalton Tucker. I think he was formerly the tackle from Marshall. I can't recall though, but he's in here as a guard. Probably another guy that might be a practice squad body. Blake Freeman, you're kind of hoping doesn't, like, you want to continue to develop his body. A big thing with him was play strength. So you're kind of hoping he gets a little bit more time to develop. You're hoping Ryman and Smith, those guys can stay healthy. I am curious, though, if one of them go down, is it going to be Gonclaves or is it going to be Freeland that steps in? I imagine it'll be Freeland. But that's your offense. Again, a bit of this is projection on my part in terms of what to expect with Anthony Richardson in Sykin's offense for a full year. But I'm going to go ahead and send this sucker to the moon, man. I got faith. I got faith in Sykin. I got faith if this team can stay healthy, that they're going to be something to watch out for on offense. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about the defense. And when it comes to the defense, we got to start with the defensive line. Again, this is a team that's not going to be blitzing almost at all. So they're going to be relying on their front four to get that pressure. And part of me, I might not have Liatu listed as a starter just yet, but I do think he eventually usurps Kwity Paye, because I think Kwity Paye might be on his way out. I think this might be his last year. They're not going to give him that fifth-year option. He just hasn't been that productive. And I know people were like, well, it was a little banged up last season, had a concussion, but he just hasn't been productive. Like, you go to, like, you look at pressure, like last year, like Kwity Paye, 28 pressures, 8 sacks. Like, okay, the sack numbers all pretty, but I mean, you look at, like, he rushed the passer a hot 410 times. You look at like Tyquan Lewis, who only rushed the passer 259 times, 44 pressures, 5 sacks. You look at Sampson, who had comparable pass rushing snaps, 48 pressures, 10 sacks. You look at the pass rush win rate, and it's like Lewis, 17.1%. Sampson Ibukam, you have 14.4%, and then Kwity Paye, 10.4%. I do feel like he's probably on the out. Going to be on the outside looking in by the end of the year. Honestly, I probably should have went ahead and projected that Liatu ends up being the lead snap getter along there with Ibukam at edge rush. But I don't know, man. I liked Kwity Paye coming out of Michigan. It's just he hasn't been able to hit that ceiling, hit that potential. That's just the fact of the matter. And I mean, let's just go ahead and talk about the depth, because you do have Liatu there. He's going to get a lot of playing time. I think he's going to wreak a hell of a lot of havoc. I think that next guy up is Tyquan Lewis, who was arguably one of the best pass rushers last season. I'd say Ibukam, but like Lewis, when called upon, was hella effective. He truly was. I think you got Deo Odeyingbo, drafted in the same class as Kwity Paye. He hasn't really developed that well either. Like, his pass rush win rate, 9.7 last year. He ended up having 29 pressures, 12 sacks. I mean, again, you look at that sack number and you're like, oh, it's so pretty. But it's like, okay, but what was this guy? What was this guy doing? And I mean, to be fair, like, he's got a versatile body, someone you could like kick inside of the tackle, like on passing downs. So for me, that gives him a little bit more value maybe than a Kwity Paye. I just feel like Kwity Paye's on the outside looking in. At least he will be at the end of this season. Might be me calling that prematurely, but I don't know. We'll see. DeForest Buckner, still hella good. One of the best, I would say one of the best defensive interior players in the league. I'd say he's a top 10 guy. Ended up having 52 pressures in 9 sacks last season. And then you're going to get Grover Stewart for the whole season, hopefully. He's one of the best run defending interior players in the league. It's kind of easy to say that And like he brings a decent, an okay amount of pass rush to the table. But he's always been a guy that I'm like, okay, I feel like you could at least take a shot to upgrade. But there's no denying like the value he brings, especially just a team that's desperately wants to have that depth. Like he brings a good value to him. Roquan Davis is going to firmly be his backup and only called upon when Grover Stewart isn't on the field. When it comes to the other interior players there, I loved Eric Johnson the second. I forgot where he came out of. It was like Missouri State. Here, let me check real quick. It was Missouri State. Love to see it. I really liked him coming out. He had I remember during the Senior Bowl, he tried a fake spin move. It was one of the slowest fakes you'll ever see, but it was funny. And I had a good time with that. I truly did. But he's gonna be fighting for some snaps there on the interior. He ended up having 265 snaps. Wasn't necessarily pretty, but it was what it was. You got Adetomiwa Adebari. I loved coming out of Northwestern. Someone that, needed development. I'm hoping that he ends up being the guy that kind of like gets a big snap bump. Last year, he ended up only being on the field for 132. I hope that goes up, and I'm hoping to see like that pass rushing nightmare, that penetrating 3-tech that I thought he could be, because he was someone I was really, really high on. Like his testing was just nuts. It was insane. Part of me is a little scared this might be the wrong defense for him schematically. He might be more of like a 3-4 end type, but we'll see. They also got Taven Bryant, former first rounders, kind of bounced around the league, and then Lalu. I don't know how he's going to stick to this squad. Some of the other edges, you got Gennard Avery, who also splits time as like being an off-ball linebacker. He's kind of this tweener type. Titus Leo and Isaiah Land, former, I think both were from the 2023 class. Land, former linebacker. No, was he? Yeah, no, he was an edge player that you kind of felt was maybe a little too light to play linebacker. What's he listed at now? Is he at that like 240? Nope, still 225. Okay, so real big tweener. Don't know if he makes, or I have my doubts he makes squad. But I mean, they already got like their top 5 edges are already kind of entrenched as is. Question here on the interior is like who makes a squad, like Bryant or Adebari. I'm pulling for Adebari. But talking about the linebackers here, you got EJ Speed, who I thought stepped up, did exceptionally well, went from special teamer to like, no, he's a good starting linebacker. What are we doing here? He was very, very good. Wouldn't mind seeing the miss tackle rate go down. That was kind of a big problem with this team, was missed tackles. He was at 15.7%, so you kind of hoping that number gets quite a bit better. You got Zaire Franklin, another guy who the previous year stepped up, looked really good. He's exceptionally solid, but again, he's at 12.3. That's not a bad missed tackle rate for a linebacker. But when it comes to what these guys do in coverage, it's nothing special. They're your typical minimal gain type of guys that could sneak in a few pass breakups. I think between the two, they had 9 pass breakups last year, but they no interceptions. I think they ended up only allowing 1 touchdown. So pretty darn solid. They were also active around the line of scrimmage at stopping the run. But again, you want a guy like EJ Speed to clean up some of those missed tackles. Looking at the linebacker depth, as Catalan's listed there. I like that. I like the move because he was already at around like 227 pounds for a safety. So yeah, 227 pounds. So now he's just going to have to put on a little bit more bulk, but the movement skills are good. He's got a nose for the football as well. Like playing deep safety at times for Mizzou, go out there like making plays, and like the range on this guy is legit. Grant Stewart, kind of been around the league for feels like a long time. That might not necessarily be the case, but like honestly, there's not really notable depth at linebacker. There really isn't. Like Cameron McGrone, yeah, like former Michigan player. Just I think Patriots like gave up on him real early. He hasn't really seen a lot of time here. Couldn't really tell you about guys like Luby, and you got Anderson. Craig Young, he was in this draft class. I didn't evaluate him, so couldn't tell you much about him. So, like, yeah, you kind of hoping the linebacker core is able to stay healthy because they don't have much behind Speed and Franklin, or at least those guys aren't really proven in any regard. And then I'm a little down on the secondary, in particularly, really that corner. It comes down to that corner 2 position. As Jalen Johnson was fine enough as a rookie, but like nothing that was like insane. Let's look at allowed 6 touchdowns last year, no interceptions, 5 pass breakups. Kenny Moore saw a little bit of dip in terms of his production in the slot, like still really good when it comes to playing the run. Like his run defense among the best among slot corners, but allowed a 79% completion rate, which when you're in the slot, it's typically going to be higher than what you see from outside corners, but even at 79%, that's pretty stinking high. He also allowed 4 touchdowns last year. Though I will say, man, Juju Brents had a solid year. He was all right for a rookie, but you do want to see a jump from him. He allowed a 66.7% completion rate. That's a little high, but not bad. Allowed 3 touchdowns, had 5 pass breakups and interceptions. So, like, keep in mind, like, I like the room. It's just like they got some stuff that they need to prove. Julian Blackmon is back on a 1-year deal. I believe he played like the second or third most snaps of anyone on the roster last year. Don't know why that no, he didn't have a big market, because he's been a solid tackler. Didn't allow a touchdown last season, came away with 4 interceptions. I don't get it. I don't get why the NFL wasn't higher on him. I don't get why the market wasn't bigger. I could also say the same thing about like Jordan Fuller. Like there were some safeties in last year's free agent class I really liked. And I mean, Blackman's got the flexibility to play really wherever. So he brings some legitimate, and I mean legitimate, versatility. And then at the other safety spot, I got Nick Cross. So he kind of usurped Rodney Thomas at the end of the season. Rodney Thomas ended up not getting the last 2 starts. It ended up going to Nick Cross. Nick Cross was someone I was very high on in that same draft class as Bernhard Raimann, and I'm kind of hoping that the Roosters come to roost. I don't know if that's a saying, but I'm making it one. I was a big fan. Like, this guy's movement skills to me were insane. His ability to come in like a heat-seeking missile and lay the lumber and lay a hit, and he was pretty solid. Like, again, played just under 300 snaps, but he was relatively solid, especially the back end. And I mean, he's got that special teams experience as well. That basically all he's been doing the last 2 years, but I'm kind of hoping that he is able to unseat Rodney Thomas, who Rodney Thomas I think is fine. He's a good depth piece, but like he does got a little bit of risk and reward when it comes to coverage. And it's not like he's someone that can come downhill and make a sure tackle. He kind of wants to be a big hitter, and it doesn't always go well. Like 23.3% missed tackle rate. That's not good. Not great. Some would say it's bad. So I'm going to go with Nick Cross. That ends up being the starter there in the secondary. But let's talk about the depth. in this cornerback room, in this secondary, as they currently got Jalen Simpson listed as a corner, and to me that makes sense because the dude's super light, doesn't play the run well. So to me, if you were gonna draft him, like he was either gonna be like a center fielder playing constantly deep there at safety, or he was gonna be playing a lot of off coverage in like a cover 3 where he could just use that speed and not really have to get physical. So they're currently listing him as a corner. That can change though, but I mean, they got pretty good depth at safety. So if you want to keep him on the roster, you probably got to have him listed as a corner, though he could do either or. Dallas Flowers missed a big chunk of last year after the ACL. I think it'll be interesting. There could be a little bit of a camp competition there between him and Jalen Jones. So that'll be something to watch out for. And then Darnell Baker wasn't that good last year, unfortunately. Kind of, at this point, it's just depth, maybe like Amir Speed. Who was he? Alabama State or Michigan State? I can't recall. Michigan State, but he's built insanely, like 6 foot, 6'3", 215 pounds. Kind of insane. Tested out really well, so he was kind of a very athletic prospect that needed development. So kind of a long shot to make the squad. Chris Lamons has been around a while, just as a special teamer. Does he get usurped here? I think so. I think he's kind of more of a guy that'll bounce around the league. Currently, like they got Micah Abrams listed as the backup in the slot there. I don't hate it. If he can make the roster, I think that'd be really cool. Ronnie Harrison Jr. He actually played some snaps last season, did he? I always get him and Ronnie Hickman mixed up. I don't know why. I don't see. Okay, yeah, he played like 234 snaps last season. His tackle rate wasn't that great, but he did come away with 2 interceptions. I think one of them went for a pick 6 last year. But again, I could be thinking of Hickman. So I could be getting my Ronnies mixed up. But yeah, solid safety group. Couldn't really tell you much about the guys behind them. Been unfamiliar with some of those names. But yeah, like I feel like the secondary does have quite a bit to prove. Like I have really no questions about Blackman. Kenny Moore, will he continue to regress in coverage? I don't think that'll be the case. I think he'll go back to be one of the best slot corners in the NFL. But Juju Brents, can he take another step? Jalen Jones, can he take a step? Again, he was pretty average last year, but was also a rookie. Nick Cross, will he step up and be really good? Like, I think it's fair to say there's some questions in the secondary. There truly is. But I like the squad. I like the direction that they're headed in, and I like some of the additions that they have made. But let's go ahead. Let's project how this team's gonna do in 2024. When it comes to the strength of schedule, I actually have them with the 7th easiest schedule in the NFL. And let's go ahead. Let's run through the game by game and talk about the potential ceiling of this squad. As hey, I think they could avenge they lost both games to the Texans last year, I believe. No, they won that first game in Houston, and then they ended up losing the home game at the end of the year. So isn't that wild? But I think they avenged that home loss last season. I honestly think they probably split with the Texans. Packers is going to be a tough one. So I'm a little hesitant to give them a win there, but I think the games right here, the Bears and the Bears and the Steelers, those are winnable. Again, I think the Jags probably split. They probably split with the Colts, so I'm just going to go ahead and give the Colts the home win against the Jags. You got Tennessee coming off a bye. How good are they going to be? In all honesty, I think this division's going to end up splitting games with each other. I truly do. I mean, we go back. Yeah, they won. The Colts won both games last year, but both those games were within a score. And I mean, to be fair, that game in Tennessee was kind of wild. It's kind of wild when it came to like the whole issues with like special teams. Like it was kind of nuts. So I think they could go either way. But I mean, Tennessee's coming off a bye. Let's just say you split the division. I think you can beat the Dolphins. Sure, they're coming off their bye, but you got that one at home. The Vikings are a winnable game. Buffalo at home can be winnable, but Buffalo was a much better team in the second half of the season last season. So I think maybe say you go 2-2 against the AFC East is fair. Wow, your bye ain't till week 14, kind of nuts. Let's say you sneak one past Detroit. I don't think that's out of the realm of reason. You beat the Broncos, and you get wins down the stretch here. That's feels like it's about to be a high ceiling. 11 wins. Ooh, I feel like 12 could be the ceiling. Let's say you upset the. Let's say something wonky happens here with the Jets. So 12 wins. That's the ceiling I'm giving y'all. Obviously, if like injury occurs, maybe you're looking at another 9-8. I know some people are gonna be like, "Well, we upgraded at backup with Joe Flacco." Joe Flacco is a freaking fossil. I don't know if last year was real life. I don't. That man came off the couch and treated every game like it was like a turkey bowl, like an annual turkey bowl. He just went out there and was slinging. So I think 9-8 for the floor, even 8-9 is fair. Again, that's assuming, like injuries don't like completely derail this team and end up like just like it's like one of those situations where like, okay, this team was so hurt. Of course, they only won 4 games. But I'm going to go ahead with like a floor of 8. When it comes to my prediction, I have them going 10-7. So it is an improvement over last season with, some would say, an easier schedule, but there's some tough games in there. Like, I think some of your away matchups are a bit sucky, like having to travel to Lambeau. You got travel to MetLife to face what might be the Aaron Rodgers Jets. Like I feel like I guess your away games aren't terrible. They really aren't. I don't know. I thought part of me thought it may have been a little bit harder than that. But I mean, you get the Bills and the Dolphins at home. That's ideal. You get to face the Patriots and the Jets away. That's kind of what you would want, right? I mean, you get the Lions and the Bears at home. Like, I mean, you can argue that maybe you'd rather take the Packers at home and then have to go to Soldier, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I got a 10-7. I feel like if that allows them to be contenders for the playoff race, but at the same time, I feel like it allows enough room for like Anthony Richardson to kind of have those peaks and valleys. It takes into account maybe the defense where, hey, we're figuring some stuff out with our secondary, our cornerback room. Let's be specific. So, yeah, I don't know. You let me know what you think in the comment section below, Colts fans. I try, but you could go ahead and check out my deep dive on the Titans. If you want to take a look at some of your divisional rivals, I still got to work on the Jags and the Texans. Or you can check out my summer deep dive into the 2025 NFL draft class. But as always, until next time, be easy, my friends. Later.